Hello and welcome to the program. I am Suren. Is it possible to survive a world without cheating, fights, and wars of today's humanity? Whether it is possible for humanity to survive the world without strife, hatred, enmity, and war is a subject of intense debate among philosophers, socialists, sociologists, and scientists, with arguments split between the necessity of conflict for evolution and capacity of humans to choose peace. Capacity for choice. Many argue that war is not a biological necessity, but a human choice. Do you agree? Societies have, at various points in history, demonstrated the ability to coexist peacefully by establishing peace systems, networks of neighboring societies that do not make war on each other. Evolution of cooperation. Well, only the human history indeed included conflicts on resources, and modern civilization is built on vast complex interdependence. This cooperation makes war increasingly detrimental to all parties involved. Incentivizing non-violent conflict resolution. Well, we have to redefine conflict. A world without war does not mean a world without disagreements. Instead, it would require transforming violent conflict into non-violent, constructive disagreement, using diplomacy rather than force. Is it possible? Arguments against survival, necessity of conflict. Well, human nature and tribalism is the subject we have to talk about. Some perspectives suggest that humans are fundamentally tribal, even now, and wired for competition and survival, making conflict an inevitable byproduct of social, political, and economic interaction. Struggle as driver of growth. From a psychological standpoint, struggle and optimal stress, or eustress, necessary for human growth, fostering resilience and giving life some meaning. A completely conflict-free world might lead to stagnation or a fragile and inadaptable human species, as some think. What about resource competition? As long as resources are limited, competition, and by extension, some form of conflict, are viewed by some as being inevitable. Conclusion and future possibility? Well, while a world without war is often seen as an idealistic, long-term goal, may be believed in as possible through debatable and deliberate efforts to address the root causes of hatred, and conflict, such as inequality, fear, and lack of accountability. The consensus leans towards the idea that while conflict is a part of life, violent, destructive war is not an inescapable fate. Yet the question remains: would it be possible for humanity to survive a world without a strife, hatred, enmity, war, and destruction of lives? Lou Marinoff, a philosopher, wrote an interesting work. The world is at war with itself. Good one. Pessimism is ripe. Hubbes and Freud diagnosed the world as a permanent feature of human life. But arguing against these figures, philosopher Lou Marinoff claims war is not necessary, peace is possible. The self-consciousness of human beings allows us to negate our animalistic instincts towards aggression and hatred. But we are asleep at the wheel. Marinoff actually provides a wake-up call. Hubbes and Freud on human nature write this, right in between the First and Second World Wars, amidst the global depression triggered by the Wall Street crash of 1929 and escalating clashes between communists and Nazis in Germany. Sigmund Freud found many resources or reasons to wax pessimistic views about the human condition. In Civilization and its Discontents, as well as the other related works, he postulated that our murderous biological inheritance and irremediably infantile psychology predispose us time and again to episodes of mass psychosis and organized group violence. Freud further opined what we can overachieve a world without inequity, strife, and war. He implored us to recognize the truth that intellect and will are merely a plaything and tools of our instincts, and affects that hatred is evolution and older than love, that our deepest impulses are draconian, and that we are all descended from a primeval gang of murderers. Thus, Freud unknowingly reconstituted a psychological version of Thomas Hobbes' 1651 Leviathan, original sin, and an adjusted human nature to be neither good nor evil in itself, but rather perpetually dangerous and volatile. Hobbes' description of our natural state is a war of all against all, a ceaseless and ruthless power struggle among myopically self-regarding predators whose lives are nasty, brutish, and short. Hubbes' prescription for our emergence from congenital savagery into civilization is the establishment of a common power to sustain social contracts and protect the state itself. Sovereign government necessarily wields both the scepter of justice and sword of defense. Take it or leave it. Tolstoy hammered a fatalistic nail into the coffin. In War and Peace, he argued that all war are fated the inception of the universe, that Napoleon was only a pawn in a cosmic chess match, and that a king is history's slave. As it was said, there is no truth to be found. no mathematical rule, no natural philosophical deduction, no etiological necessity, no biological imperative, no cultural predestination, and no systematic inevitability, which dictate that war must be. Hence, we can conclude that peace can be. On the other hand, when religious philosophers declare that people, after being judged by the Most High, will be ushered into a beautiful paradise to remain there forever, and their evil would go to hellfire, how can it be believed in? Good question. There are those Christians who are earnestly attached to the idea of an eternal hell, not only because they feel they must be, also because it is what they want to believe. For some of them, in fact, it is practically the best part of the story. It probably gives them a sense of belonging to a very small and select company, a very special club, and they positively relish the prospect of a whole eternity in which to enjoy the impotent envy of all those writhing, resentful souls that have been permanently closed, signed to an inferior neighborhood outside the gates. That is the sort of prestige that cannot be brought or bought where the common people shop. The afterlife is considered one of the great mysteries of faith. But the Bible apparently offers a surprisingly clear picture of what happens when life on earth ends. Dr. Eben Alexander has certainly plausible clues to the continuity of consciousness after the end of physical existence on earth. We also have discovered clues in addition to the documented scenarios in regard to previous lives human species have experienced, though, as with everything else, not completely conclusive as the study continues. I believe, as a scientist, it is certainly logical to give any new findings at least 50-50 chance to be correct and conclusive. Our knowledge grows every passing day. If we can use our imaginations and consider what we, as human species, and for a very long time have probably been denying the truthfulness of the subject matter, and to take it as the reality for the moment of the study and contemplation, we may be able to discover an enriched way of logical expression or an opening to the comprehension of the truth of the matter under scrutiny. We can probably discover the possibilities are endless. A little open-mindedness and patience may be a correct way to follow. Curiosity, not pretense. Discovery, not falsehood. Thus, advanced thinking will be our guide. Let us remember that there are many thinkers amongst the other species of humans who care truly. Therefore, let us not blind ourselves to the discrepancies and knowledge. That is the only way to advance. All our studies and considerations, imaginations and dreams point to the same but unknown and at least assumed territories that human life is not only dependent on the physical reality we all are familiar with. we can never deny the dreams and meditations of every human person, knowing deep down that existence is expressed completely as an aware consciousness and still retaining the aspects of individualism cannot be based upon only wishful thinking. Remember, ex nihil nihilum. Nothing comes from nothing. And when something that can be imagined or felt as the reality, that could be the reason enough to consider that it could be real after all. Human intelligence, apart from one physicality, is and can be far serious and superior. Taking this into account, we can easily claim that the humanness we share is undeniably real. Real-life stories about the reincarnation have been noted and documented by certain researchers, although often being considered unimportant by different groups of deniers. Some evidence is still available and cannot be simply ignored, and I believe they deserve to be considered and again scientifically studied, at least within the realm of psychology, not only by assumptions about unrealities, dreams, and imaginations, or the area of wishful thinking. NDE studies should continue under scientific scrutiny in a serious consideration, as all these human elements may point to the long denied but inevitably real verities. Even the so-called but oft laughed at and ignored yet advanced attempts of communication with the unseen and universal realm should be taken seriously. Early childhood imaginations, dreams, and most importantly, the unexpected memories about the past, or very unusual kinds which may sound like a futuristic story, must not be dismissed or put aside. Do NDE experiences give us a clue for the possible continuity of consciousness after the earth life has ended? Good question. What evidence is there to suggest feelings of peace and belonging from NDE are not just production of the brain preparing for death? Many people cite in the least as an argument. However, there is a story about an 87-year-old man whose brain was being monitored as he died, and assumed there was an activity in parts associated with memory and feelings of peace leading up to death. It seems brain cells can survive for a long period after biological death. Therefore, it makes sense that this sense of peace and learning while experiencing death can be considered a biological way to prepare for the brain to cope with death. Good point. People can see what is happening around them when they are unconscious. This can be validated after the effect. Someone might accurately describe how a doctor tried to resuscitate them. However, in the meanwhile, control groups who didn't have NDEs were far less accurate in describing what the other doctors were doing. We understand also that NDE, by definition, does not result in death, and that is a key point to make, and for an intelligent organism with a highly developed emotional system like a human being in despair can be severely detrimental for survival. Coming away from a near-death event with a sense of calm and peace, because they know there is something beyond, may result in a higher chance of recovery from the death event, resulting in a higher chance of reproduction, later passing on the productivity to experience NDE. One can observe hundreds of different ways it could come into existence, and the evolution passes down through hundreds of neutral mutations as well. One may consider many things proving it to be the one way of truth, or towards truth, and the other may be it being interpreted as impossible. However, where are the things we might learn from as evidence, one way or another, with our very limited views of existence, because we don't know everything? But absolute professional comprehension seems pretty challenging. Consider. However, brain preparing for death is a really unusual explanation for NDE. Why would the brain prepare for death like that, one wonders? Near-death experiences, where individuals are declared clinically dead, have out-of-body experiences, where, when brought back to life, they report to have seen things outside of themselves that are corroborated by hospital staff. A documented case study of a physician's NDE provides yet one more piece of evidence that highlights the limitations of the material being the issue of perspective, which cannot explain the conscious perception of verified events in the hospital setting during an NDE by a patient while in cardiac arrest with eyes taped shut. Outstanding characteristics of the case include an NDE with a scale score of 23, indicating a deep NDE, and 6 perceptions during cardiac arrest that were verified by hospital personnel, and which have no physiological explanation. Consider. Dr. Stevenson investigated hundreds, if not thousands of cases of the children reporting, remember past lives, unlike the common conceptions? They do not grandiosely all report to have been kings and queens. Many of their stories have been corroborated, and it is very difficult to explain how children can know intimate details of the families of their past lives that are then corroborated. Consider. When meeting these past families, they often confirm that the child is a reincarnation. There are even reports of children having birthmarks that correspond to the death wounds of their previous reincarnation. Two literature reviews that propose that PSI phenomenon, meaning remote viewing, telepathy, out-of-body experiences, have been proven to be real and replicated at large scales enough to warrant them as real, using the standardized application to any other area of science. It is concluded that psychic functioning has been well established. When considering the statistical results, all the studies examined are far beyond what is expected by chance. Arguments that these results could be due to methodological flaws in the experiments are soundly refused. Effects of similar magnitude to those found in government-sponsored research at SRI and SAIC have been replicated as a number of laboratories across the world. Such consistency cannot be readily explained by claims of flaws or fraud. The evidence provides cumulative support for the reality of PSI, which cannot be readily explained the way expected, but equally of the studies fraud, selective reporting, experimental or analytical incompetence, or other frequent criticisms. The evidence for PSI is comparable to that for establishment of phenomena in psychology and other disciplines, although there is no consensual understanding of them yet. Again, one asks, why do you think NDEs are so reliant on total accounts that are such a minority of experiences? Good question. This is why we think is the most troublesome thing, and clearly explained for those that believe such fantastical things, and they are truly still going on. Why, for example, do more than 99% of people during anesthesia experience a complete cessation of consciousness? What do you think? We know that new memories can be attached to the older generations of the period. Right. Something that just may have happened even to you, reminding you of a similar incident from your youth. If the way we store memories is like modulating a new signal over an existing carrier signal, then what has been described as seeing your life flash before your eyes could be the unwinding of these layers of information. If the underlying mechanism was starting to fail, the later modulations could be lost first, and you would experience this unwinding as a series of memories in reverse order, as the ability to decode the modulations deteriorate. Those, all of the memories, could be what generates the feeling of calm as the remaining memories fade into the warm nothingness of the room. As it is known, physics suggests that the universe began with a big bang. It might have been an extraordinarily violent event. If true, then we may find ourselves in the aftermath of the most intense and destructive occurrence known. Considering that we emerge from such a cataclysmic origin, what significance does a minor death hold when we come from a force capable of annihilating anything? Given this perspective, what power does death truly have over us? Everything we literally know and experience, everything have power over death. Cosmic scale of things do not even matter anymore, if it plays no relative role in our lives. We cannot even think about the start and death of the universe when our existence is ruled by our death, if that is at all so. One popularly tends to think that as the brain dies, the neurons that produced consciousness, if that is so, die also. There really is not much more than can be said. Even after we get to the point that we completely understand the neurological processes behind consciousness, it may be impossible to say what effect the random death of neurons will produce. We don't know. But if consciousness existed independently outside the brain and in neurons, what then? That is a question. You imagine now a world made of sea of humanity, all living their natural lives with all their interests, discoveries, dreams, ideals, enmities, wars, and their unique ideas. And you, although part of that whole existence, having many friends, every day facing frowning and smiling faces, you are in truth alone, no one to turn to and converse with. Like every other individual human beings, you have your own interests and ways of thinking, inventiveness, making you uniquely you, with your solutions to problems, concepts, and your way of loving and living. But you are still all alone, and you hardly think about it, and hardly feel it, right? You had, like every other person, surrounded with your own childhood, your own memories, thoughts, and inbuilt characteristics. Imagine that you are allowed to think, and often it is not so. You even have your own dreams, as we all do. You're being subjected to discouragements which no longer matter. How humble and how simple your feelings and emotions may be. You feel love, resentment from everything and everybody surrounding you, and your mind is filled with curiosity and many questions you want to find answers to. In some societies, this is being denied. And as you start going to school or other schools, colleges, universities, no matter at what level, from simplest of things to more complicated discoveries, you mature, and what you learn makes you into a human being as one of those individuals in the sea you are part of, even making of the sea of humanity you are surrounded with. Your education slows you down. You discover more responsibilities for your individual self and others. You fall in love and start sharing your life. And sometimes it works perfectly well. You are fulfilled and happy. But it does not always last long, as you share all the other one's interests. And if you and the other are mature enough and wise, you may compromise and live happily ever after. But sometimes it does not work, and you drift into different directions apart from being educated in the classroom of inevitable life, and learn that, after all, you are all alone, doing things unto things, and life goes on. You create further memories. You may fall in love again and again, or change your lifestyle and ideally live healthier and happier, while your physical being goes through some minor and major changes. And even your thinking pattern may change. You are in the opinion that you live forever, never considering that there is a conclusion. You may turn to a belief or religion, for your alternate answers are somewhat influenced, and discover without even being aware. All your thought patterns are altered. All your passing dreams and memories are almost forgotten, and sometimes you may be geared into creative thinking and imagination, if lucky, and replace those memories with newly made ones, or simply keep all your memories you were born with. All your loves, all your dislikes, everything. You know your body generally well and genetically programmed to follow its unique programming, and well-established belief systems try to teach you and prove to you that there is an afterlife wherein you will be rewarded or punished for eternity. You may thus swallow all that, allowing to be force-fed, get confused, or abandon any belief systems. This is when you are either stagnating or continue with your adventures, swimming in the sea of humanity. Let us ride the wave, for we certainly can. You know you came from a background of knowing, not guessing. You're always surrounded with knowledge about this life and the life after, as you may call or consider it. By the time of ending the theatrical scene, you just melt into the sea of the universe where you are originally from and eternally exist. And unlike the way you have been taught based on assumptions of the other learned individuals and their establishments in teaching you or what they know in a limited fashion, by going still deeper, you truly know it better. Just follow yourself. That's all I can say. Thank you for sharing this experience, and thank you for watching. We will meet you again by the next episode. Keep smiling and be happy. And once again, thank you.